Mompreneur Studio. I'm Anisa Crespo, and on this episode of She Swaps, I am talking to Annalee Vinyard, and she is an author amongst other things. So, Annalee, welcome. How are you today?
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm doing great, and I feel blessed to be here with you today.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you're joining me today. So, please share with the audience all about your journey. Tell us about your book and anything else you'd like to share.
Well, let me share a little bit about myself. Actually, I have my book. My book is right here. It's called A Legacy of Love. This is my mother holding me when I was a baby. And I wrote my book in several languages, English and Spanish, Un legado de amor. And I also have a workbook related to my book. It has also 12 chapters and just recently a cookbook. And I will share a little bit my journey on why and a little bit about myself. Well, I'm a first generation born here in the United States. And for me, I was not really thinking or planning to write a book about my story. This book is actually my story and the story of my mother. And this came across as a calling. I'm a believer, and I'm very respectful if other people or the audience that you have are not. I believe that we all come from different backgrounds, and that is perfectly fine. We all have, we come from baby steps. That's how I call it, even in my book. Sometimes people are asleep, sometimes people are awake. And that means the way I translate that is that if we're asleep, that means that we're still not exposed to the word. And if we're awake, means that we've been exposed somehow to the word. We know of the Lord, and that is wonderful. But we not necessarily did we all have that background. That means that maybe we had a loved one that exposed us to the word, and if we don't, that's just fine. But my book started a couple of years ago. I would say 5+ years from the pastor that I used to go to. He talked to us as a family, and he asked us to step up. As we were stepping up, he goes through us. He went to my kids and then to my husband, and he stood right in front of me, and he says, you know, you've gone through all these things and all these experiences. God is letting me know, and he wants you to know that he has a calling. You've gone through so many things. And I was like, a calling? I was in the middle of changing careers. I've always, my background is actually a teacher. And for many years, and I was becoming an interpreter and translator, going back to school and fulfilling other dreams in my life. As the pastor stands right in front of me, he says, he wants you to know that you will be setting a lot of people free with your own story. You have a journey. You've gone through a lot of things. You know what I'm talking about. I definitely knew what he was talking about. I understood, but I was not willing to share. I was even thinking that maybe God was confused about me wanting to expose my mother's story, my story. And I'm like, wait a minute, maybe this is not it. But it was just so clear that after he shared what I was going to be doing, he said, this will become international because I understood why, because I speak more than one language. So as we sat, I was sitting there and I was thinking about everything he said. And after the pandemic hit, and as the pandemic hit, we were not going much out. We were staying home. I continued working on all my dreams. And as we were sitting, I heard the pastor that we go to, Gateway Church, he had a visitor, and the visitor was sharing, if we would all, those believers with these little baby floaties, And he actually was in a baby pool. And he says, well, you are sitting there with this baby pool with these baby floaties. If you would just be willing to go to the ocean, and if you would just be willing, now you know how to swim. If you would be willing to share your story, how many people would be rescued? How many people would not would be saved? And how many people would come to the light? And I'm like, that's when I knew, Anisa, that he was not going to let me go. I'm like, I understood that it was going to be he was going to continue pressing, and that I needed to surrender. So I surrendered and I started writing. I had never done this before. So I was aware that he would help me, that he would guide me as I was writing. So I knew that I had to do it in a way that I would be able to impact a lot of people, and that this would be available to everyone, and that I would spread with my own story, that it's my own testimony of what I went through. And it's not an easy story, and I will share that with you today, but that God was always there with me. And maybe one piece of my story will help someone. That's what it's about. We might not connect with everything that I went through, but if my little piece of my whole journey will help one of your ladies, or even if you have, male audience here, that's what it's about. And even if they're not believers, to help them and bring them to the light, to help them and let them know that there is hope. And the hope is not in their past and where they've been. Their hope is letting them know that if I was able to make it, they're able to make it. That if they're able to connect with someone else that has gone through all these different obstacles, circumstances, that it is well. So my story is a story, and I write this in the back. It says, my story is a story of hope, faith, courage, persistence, and love for God. I am not a person that I push on religion. I'm not a religious person, but I have to admit and be humble that I would not be here today. After I share my story, you will understand why I held on to God, and it was because of my mother. I lose my mother at 15, and it changed my life drastically. But I'm so blessed that she taught me of the Lord. She was very natural about sharing the Lord. She was not a person that would push religion. I am not a person that I push religion. I just naturally share what I went through and how he was more than willing and loving to help me in all these different obstacles that I faced. So I went into losing my mother at 15, living with my grandparents that were extremely controlling and manipulative. And then all my dreams were stolen at a very young age. 18, I lived with my grandparents on my mother's side of the family. My parents were divorced. My mother passes a placenta previa back in 88. She was very young. She was just 35. And she was full of life. But back in that time, there was no way to know when someone had that kind of a complication. And she starts bleeding to death, and we transfer her to another hospital. It was very late. By that time, her organs and her body start shutting down. They gave her the transfusion, and out of the country as an interpreter and translator, she worked for General Motors. It was very difficult. Gladly, she had a relative that had the same blood type, but it took a long time for her to eventually get the blood, and it was too late. So my mother passes away. I remember with my brother, he's 5 years younger, crying out, asking the Lord to please spare my mother's life, asking for a miracle that never happened. But I remember what she would tell us, always seek the Lord. We end up living with my grandparents that were very, very abusive. They took the desires of my heart. They had, for my mother and myself, an arranged marriage. This isn't easy. I'm first generation born here. My background is Hispanic, French, and Spaniard. Very difficult. We were not really much allowed to share. My mother passes away. She had a home out of the in Mexico, and she also had money, life insurance, and other possessions, which they took hands on. I was not willing for my mother's property to sell or for them to take over. So as a punishment, they marry me off against my will, and they send me, and they left me in Mexico. I asked and asked for it not to happen, and it was very hard. I did not have the personality that I eventually developed after going through so many things. And my mom and I had that same personality, that we were very easy. And still my aunts mentioned that, oh, the problem was that you were very sweet. You were very easy to manipulate in your grandfather's hands. So for me, I grew up with a lot of confusion. These were the grandparents that promised in my mother's deathbed that they would take care of us, that they would protect us. And this is not true. And I hear other relatives say, now you have the opportunity to figure out if it was truly that they loved you, or what, which you already know, Annalee, why they really took you in and took your brothers in. My mother passes away, leaving her newborn baby. Obviously, my brother Jesse and myself. I was the oldest, the only daughter, and two brothers. We end up living in that, under that environment. They end up marrying me off. I had a high school boyfriend. They end up ending that relationship, deciding who I was going to marry, and obviously derailing what God had in store for me. And I was holding on to what God and what my mother had taught me. Hold on to the Lord. Hold on to the Lord. I eventually end up in this dysfunctional marriage, because it was a dysfunctional mess. I had a very hard time becoming pregnant, very hard time. I had a lot of hormone problems, and I had to go through so many treatments. Finally, I become pregnant, and 5 months along, I go to the hospital, and the assistant that was not a doctor caused me to start bleeding, and I start in the process of losing my child in the same hospital where my mother, it's just unbelievable what I'm going to say, in the same hospital where my mother started her deathbed. I end up going to that hospital, which I shouldn't have gone, but they send me there. And what's going through my mind, I'm like, was my mother here? Was she in this other place? Was she, because she was in that same place, in that same area. I don't know if it was in one bed in the other, but as I'm sitting, laying there, I knew that I was going to lose my child, but then also my life was on the line. They did share that with me. You're just so far along. You're 5 months along. You might also lose your life. I really did not care. I'm like, if I'm losing my child, and it was my only hope. It was my only hope after losing my mother, being in that kind of environment without love. That was my hope, to have my child, to have my little baby, and I end up in that kind of mess. I never got to see my child. I never got to really know. They told me it was a boy. I don't know. I became really good friends of the nurse, and because I needed, to understand, to at least have someone to tell me a little bit about him. And I never got to, sing him a song. I never got to bury my child. They did not allow me to have my child because they were trying to control that, so I would not go back to the hospital and sue the hospital. So I end up with a broken heart. I end up going back home, um, distraught. Uh, that I fall into a deep depression, asking God to take me. I said, Lord, you've taken my mother. Now you're taking my son. It's time for you to also take me home. You know, I don't know if it was weeks, if it was days, if it was months, but the only person that was there with me in that room was my father-in-law. He was an amazing person. He was more like a father figure to me. Um, he was an alcoholic, and I share that in my book, how he cared. And he would tell me, don't say that. Don't tell God that you want to go. Um, Believe that God will give you a child. He's the only one that knows why you've gone through this, but God has a plan. I obviously was out of the country, and I would go a lot to the cemetery. Eventually, in that pain that I was in, such a depression, the following morning, I don't know how I got up from that bed. And I finally was asking for sitting down and having breakfast, which it was an answered prayer. I was not wanting to get up from bed. I was not wanting to teach. I got to even teach the governors and wife and kids. I sat, I had breakfast, and finally I had the desire to, I'm not going to say that I was, willing to move on, but at least I was willing to sit and have breakfast and want to talk and want to share a little bit about my confusion and the sadness and the loss that I was having to face. And I go through so many things. After that, I was facing a gallbladder pain that I went for a whole year, not wanting to have a surgery. Finally, I didn't even know that I had hours. And if my surgery was not done, I was also facing once again, life and death. The doctor shared that with me. If you don't have your surgery, we don't even know if you're going to make it, because all that vial is already in your skin. It's in your eyes. Your skin pigmentation is changing. The pain that you're having, it has gone way too far. You're going to have to go through surgery. We hope that all your organs are in good shape. So once again, I saw the Lord. As I was having the surgery, I didn't even know. Blood work was drawn. Everything seemed to be not good, but still something was not showing that I was pregnant. I did not have any intimacy after the surgery. Everything seemed to go well. I made it through the surgery. I had to recover, but I wasn't feeling well. It turned out that I had gone through the surgery pregnant, not even knowing. And I could just say that God gave me the desire of my heart, of that child that I had lost, and that he was answering that prayer of that loss that I had. And I was just surprised because I was not expecting to be pregnant. It was, I don't understand how that happened, but I could just say that God allowed that. I made it through the surgery. I'm expecting a child. I'm growing closer to the Lord. Eventually, I end up that relationship that was not established how it should have been established. I didn't receive therapy, which I should have received therapy after that relationship that I was forced into. And I believe that everyone that is in an environment of abuse, and whether if it's family, which I was in a family and also in a marriage that was not established in love, with a mother-in-law that she would take over the marriage and would allow, she would take over and she would just run our marriage. And she was very hurtful towards me because I couldn't become pregnant, and she would make it very verbal with relatives. So it was a very sad relationship, and a son that, instead of wanting to spend time with, with us as a couple and with his newborn, it was mainly about still being single, even though he was married. So it was a very difficult marriage. I finally was able to come back to the United States, get a divorce, and I share that in my book. But I did not receive therapy, which it's a very important thing. Back in that time, and even in my culture, it's a very difficult problem still now. People don't want to take therapy. Why? Because sometimes in our culture, people are still very close-minded, and they believe that, oh no, there's something wrong with me. If I go and take therapy, what are people going to say? In my book, I say, shh, finding the courage to finally speak out. I don't live to please people. I don't live to make sure that people have these good thoughts about me. As I believe, and I've realized through therapy, as long as I know that I've done everything I possibly can, we cannot live under other people's norms and their expectations. We have to live day by day, knowing that we've done everything we possibly can. And we need to break those mindsets of ignorance. That's how I call it. Maybe I'm wrong, but ignorance of not wanting to receive healing and help, and trying to see life with a different lens, a different perspective, because it's necessary. And I go through all those things, but I did not receive therapy. And I end up in after that divorce, in another relationship, extremely abusive, where my days are even counted and how I was going to end. I'm very grateful that I was able, and I run to get help on my own. I cry out to God. I said, Lord, what do I do? I'm seeing that there's all these red flags. I'm seeing that they're telling me that they're going to, end my days, that my life is going to end, like one case that was on TV, and how they're going to do this and this and this and this to me. It was grotesque. It was horrendous even to share. And I share a little more in my book. And I'm like, I have kids. I had already 2 kids. I need to make sure I put myself and my kids in safety. I had to rent my property. I had to take the steps that I needed to take. Was it easy? No. All this was baby steps. And I share that in my book. Many people might say, but how did she do it? All the dreams that were taken away from me, I was able to recover that. But yes, my dreams were derailed. I'm not going to say they were not, but only God knows why they were derailed. I don't live in negativity. I'm a person that I always try to find something good in the midst of all the things that I had to experience. I always try to push, and I learned something in therapy that I didn't even know about myself, that I'm a fighter. That's how I was able to overcome all this. And I know that I was able to overcome this beyond that because of the seed that my mother planted in me at a very young age. I don't think I would have made it this far if it wasn't because she's told me one day, Mija, listen, whatever comes your path, just never stop seeking the Lord. Never stop seeking. I think that that's what allowed me. He was always willing to seek me, but I was still kind of like, as a little girl, not now. As a little girl, I was still, well, I love you, Lord, but I lost my mother. It was very normal, that those seasons, but now as I see, I'm very grateful that she allowed me to become who I became now. My life changed tremendously. I have able to fulfill the desires of my heart. I've been able to do so many things, but it's been because I've been pushing, I've been working, I've been realizing it is okay not to be okay. It is okay to continue pushing. And my desire, my dream is to help women, to help children, to help people, men as well, that have been abused, that have been experiencing loss, that have been experiencing even human trafficking, because I definitely understand that area because of what they gave me that I didn't ask for. Being married off against my will, I'm able to understand and connect with people that are experiencing that even today.
Wow, Annalee, you have an incredible story. You are certainly a miracle. You are definitely a blessing. So we have a lot to unpack here. So the first thing, I just kind of took a couple of notes as you were talking, and I love that your book comes with a workbook, because a lot of times we read different books, and especially like a self-help book or like a self-discovery book, and when it's accompanied by a workbook, it just really enhances it even more. So
Yes.
I love that you have opted to include that. I love that it's in multiple languages. That's amazing. And you and I don't have similar stories, but a lot of your story resonates with me because I've been through my own share of traumas and overcoming and receiving a calling. And a lot of times we don't want to share because we don't want to go back and kind of open up wounds. But you said something that was really important. It's like we have to share to save other people. So we have to share our stories, and you have to share your story. And anybody that's had any kind of trauma, it's important to share about it because you don't know how many people you can help in the process. And I think that's so important. It's one of the reasons why I talk about different traumas that I've been through. I just want my traumas to become triumphs through helping other women who might be going through the same thing. Like somebody might listen to my story and say, oh my God, I'm not alone. And oh my God, she got through it. And that is what's really rewarding from that, is being able to take some of the things that have really hurt us and turn them into something positive. I love that you say I'm not a negative person. I'm the same way. I don't ever want anything I've ever been through to define me in a negative light. There's, and every day is not good, but there's something good in every day. And, those are the things that drive me. Just like I said, being able to help people and being able to talk to other women like you, like I absolutely love it. I was just telling you before we started that I started this podcast by accident, and it's an absolute blessing to be able to talk to different women from all over the world who have different resilience and journeys. And, we do share some similarities. Like I lost my mom. I wasn't a teenager when I lost her, but I was she passed away about 7 years ago, and she bled out. And I remember being in that hospital and seeing the Red Cross coming with bags and bags and bags and bags. And I was just like, what is going on? And it just happened to be they couldn't save her. It was just too late. But she was in a surgery for a cancer. So it's like she didn't make it out of that surgery, but at the same time, she was no longer suffering. So different situation, but something you said had just reminded me of that. And the other thing about therapy, it's like my parents were divorced when I was 9 months old. That was in the early 80s. And, we were from an old school Italian family. So it's like, not that it was unheard of, but it wasn't, they didn't want you to be divorced. They wanted you to make it work, and they wanted you to just, but my mother said no, like she wasn't going to go through whatever she was going through. They say like, oh, stay together for the children. Like, okay, well, what's worse, staying together and having that kind of a dysfunctional atmosphere for the children, or divorcing and, taking back my life and saying, I am doing this for my children, so that's kind of some of the things that my mom went through. And the therapy thing, like, they didn't encourage you to go to therapy. It was like, we don't want other people to know we have problems. It was, unheard of. Like, you just didn't do it. You just, suck it up, buttercup, and deal with it. And it's ridiculous. Therapy is so important for some people that need it. So I love that you were able to get help, and I love that you're able to turn that around and help other women. That's a woman after my own heart. That's exactly what I do. I was in a male dominated industry for over 10 years. And one day I literally woke up and I had this spiritual awakening, and I was like, I have to help women. And I didn't know how I was going to do it or what I was going to be doing. But all of a sudden, God and the universe started conspiring and putting people, places, and things in my way so that I could carry out this mission to help women. And now that's what I'm doing. And it's an amazing journey. So I commend you. I have to know, you said something that I don't know if I heard it wrong, but you said something like you didn't know you were pregnant and it was a gift from God, and you weren't intimate. Was it like immaculate conception, or like?
Well, I mean, I still question because I was extremely ill. I was a whole year in so much pain with my gallbladder that it came to a point where I was getting even shots to be able to continue teaching with my pain. And even when I was getting my shots, I could not stay in a certain position. So I'm like, I don't remember having intimacy because it was just so painful. And I might be wrong, but honestly, I don't remember that happening. And when the doctor affirmed that, I was like, how did that happen? That's just not possible. And for me, it was an answered prayer. God was giving me that child back. That's how I took it. It was God telling me, I know that you wanted this child. I know that you were holding on, and that it was the only way you were keeping that marriage going. You really needed that little baby. So I'm giving you that child. I understand that you needed that little one. You needed to have that baby. And eventually, I just don't understand how it happened. I'm like, no, I was extremely ill when I went into, I was having a very hard time. Every so often I had to have my shot. And even having my shot in a certain position, it was extremely painful. Even the shot at the end was not really helping me. So they had to have me with an IV from that city all the way to where they were going to, eventually I was going to go through a surgery. So I'm still stunned, but at the same time, I know who I trust, and I know that God always works things for our best. And I'm very grateful of what my mother allowed me to become now. It was her. I don't think I would have made it if it wouldn't have been because of what she taught me. So,
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. I mean, hey, who are we to say God is all powerful, all knowing,
yes.
almighty, and who are we to say what he's capable of, because he's capable of anything. So that's amazing and such a blessing. And I had always wanted to be a mother. And then I was, my husband and I were married for, a couple years, and I had lost my mother, and then like the year after I got pregnant, lost that baby. And then the year after that, I was like, I just don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can go through it again. But I did. And then I was blessed with twins, and a boy and a girl. And like that's what was in the plan for me. Like that's what it was. Like I had to go through a lot of the different things I went through to get where I'm at today. And now to be able for God to use me to work through me to help other people. So it's miraculous. I love it. I'm excited to read your book. So please tell us, where can we find it?
My book is actually on my website, and it's also on Amazon. My website is www.Annalee Vinyard, just as you have it there. So it's ANALEEVINYARD without the E .com. And that's my website. I have also there my workbook. Why did I want a workbook? And by the way, I'm also excuse me, a Christian life coach. I wanted that, and I became one, and I did my certification because I know that there's a lot of need in this area. There's a lot of ladies, and that's my specialty, to help ladies that have gone through similar stories like mine, to help them, to empower them. And my workbook has 12 chapters. Most definitely how to forgive people that have done you so much harm. Um, um, when you're hurting, how to let go when you're still hurting, how to pray in the midst of all this, and so much more. So it's 12 chapters. And for me, it's a blessing to be able to go back into all those chapters. It says, that one is in Spanish, but it has so much to offer. And praying even when you don't know how to pray. You see, I've always said this, sometimes there's people that emphasize in these very fancy prayers, and sometimes we think that that's what God wants. And I think that no, I think that he's just our father. And just like we're talking to our ordinary father, that's what he wants. He just wants a relationship with us. And it's not about a religion. It's about establishing a relationship with us, and talking to him and letting him know how we feel. That's what a prayer should be all about. And listening to the right voices over the wrong voices. As I was going through all those experiences, I believe that most of us encounter those voices that tell us, oh, your life is never going to change, oh, you're always going to stay there, oh, who's to say that oh, you're ever going to make it the other way, on the other side. So you have to know that that's actually, that is not a voice that comes up from, it's not a positive voice. Most definitely it's not something that's encouraging you. It's not from God. So you have to eliminate that and let yourself know, I could do it. So I started changing some things. I started putting on in my mirror positive post-its. I could do this. I'm loved. I'm special. I'm God's daughter. I'm amazing. All these wonderful things. And all those thoughts that were so negative, I started taking them away, and realizing that our words are powerful. The way that we talk to ourselves and the way people talk to ourselves, it really means a lot. So I needed to change that. So trusting again when trust has been broken. Wow. So 12 chapters of what I went through, finding God in your circumstances, maintaining contentment in the midst of all that chaos that we go through. How can we do that? Leaving a legacy of love. That's the name of my book. How can I leave that legacy to my kids? How to pray, how to read your Bible, how to grow in your faith, turning a generational curse into a generational blessing. Because as you know, what I went through, I definitely have to realize that I had to make my research with my cousins and family on my mom's side. What was this about? Where did this start? What was this with my grandmother and my grandfather? I didn't ask for this. I saw it as a generational curse because my mom, she didn't ask for it. They gave it to her. And then they gave it to me and no more. So whatever you were given and you didn't even ask for, you need to call it out and you need to say, I don't want this for my kids. I don't want the kids of my kids to go through this. And maybe you don't even know what, your ancestors have, but you need to pray for that and you need to call it out. Whatever it is that I don't know, I'm calling it out and I just want it to end here because it could go all the way to 4 or 5 generations and you don't want that to go on. So that's what my book shares. And I would love to share a little bit of my book because it's very powerful. It has a lot of powerful words, but this is something that I have a lot of people that on Amazon, you could even see the ratings, how wonderful it is. It has 5 stars because of the message behind it. It says, we must encourage every soul traveling this path we call life, because as we often see, it can be a brutal journey. I believe there is no one greater exists. There is no one more powerful and none more able and willing to help us than God. I have found him to be faithful and true. He is present in the middle of life's deepest storms and always near the brokenhearted. He is the only one who can mend a broken heart. He will mend your broken heart.
That's beautiful. And it's very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Wow. I'm very moved and I'm very, very excited to go grab the book and just really dive into it with the workbook. I think it's going to be amazing. And I would encourage anybody who has taken the time to listen today, to watch today, to go and do the same because it sounds like there's a message in there for everyone. And I appreciate you. I think you are a gift. And I'm so glad to have been graced with your presence today. So thank you so much, Annalee.
Well, thank you for having me today. I feel also very honored and blessed to be here with you. Thank you.